And so we'll call the meeting to order. And appointment of alternates, Charles, would you like care to sit for one of the vacancies that we have? All right, public hearings, we have none. And so we move on to old business application number 18-01 of Kevin Kowalski, Simsbury Fire District, applicant to remove silt and vegetation from pond and rehab dry hydrant on the properties located at 8 Cricket Lane, Assessors Map C19, Block 511, Lot 004B, and 9 Cricket Lane, Assessors Map C19, Block 511, Lot 008, Zone R40. Good evening, Kevin.
Good evening. I am Kevin Kowalski. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for the Simsbury Fire District, and I am here before you today, and thank you for this opportunity to request a permit to operate in the area of a pond at the end of Cricket Lane.
Oh, are you Jill?
Yes, I am.
Come, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
I'll wait.
All right, let's see, do we have a name plate?
I think she's over here.
I think it was right there.
We'll get to introductions after this. All right. Sorry, Kevin.
Oh, that's all right. I'll wait for everybody to settle. It's no problem.
Apologize, I thought it was 7:30.
So we'll be operating in the area of, at the end of Cricket Lane, specifically within the maintenance area that are as part of the town easement for both drainage and a dry hydrant. And as you know, a dry hydrant is really, in some cases, is just an empty hydrant with no valve in it that projects to lower than the level of the pond, approximately 6 feet lower. And then it transitions over with a lateral pipe into the pond with a screen. And that's how a dry hydrant is. It's very useful in that area, especially where obviously they don't have public water supply. So this one here has been silted in for some 2 or 3 years, and we've now have funded it to get rehabbed, just like the one we had on Terry's Plain Road, the old Bacon Pond. That pond was just rehabbed this past fall. Came out great. We have a substantial amount of water in that pond now, and it's accessible. So, and I think based on Mike's report that we did a good job on making sure that the area was kept clear and clean. So that one is back into service. So we want to do the same thing here, and it's going to be, you know, where it says dredged, it's really what we do is we control dredge it. We don't do the whole thing. We don't drain it. What we're going to do is towards the edges where all the cattails are, all the silt around where the suction line is in the pond, we'll drag that out. Either if we can, we will transport the product off-site. That's what we did with the Bacon Pond, which worked out extremely well. It was at a farmer's field, and we were able to spread it out. We may even use the same farmer depending on transportation costs, et cetera. Or we will dewater it there. Dewatering is a little bit more expensive because we have to actually just scoop it out, place it, and then come back at a later date. The contractor has to come back and actually remove it after it's dewatered. Plus then we have to return the soils, the grass. We have to plant new grass, and it's a lot more maintenance intensive. But if that's the case, that's what we'll have to do depending on where the silt is going to go, because we do have to find a spot for it. That's basically it. I'll answer any questions that you may have. This is a series of 4 ponds that we anticipate doing, so I'll be probably in here in another 2 months asking for another pond. It probably will be High Ridge up on top of West Ledge Mountain, and it is also in need. It's usable right now, but it's very difficult to draw. So.
What's involved in finding the spot? I'm sorry.
That's
What's
right.
involved in finding the spot to the farmers?
This is an existing.
But to take
already here.
to take the soil that you dried?
It's
to the
actually
farmers?
talking to people that we know,
Okay.
farmers, other people that are around that will request that product. Sometimes it's very good product. This particular case is going to be heavy in sand because the catch basin actually drains here. That's from a town catch basin, so we're expecting a lot of sand in this product. The other product in Bacon's Pond was very rich soil, so it was a good product. I mean, we're not selling it, we just give it to the person.
Was that sand from road sand along the,
Yeah,
over the years?
years back, yeah. That's primarily it's been the road sand, but, there's some fill-in from the edges and such. This hasn't been done in probably, well, it hasn't ever been done since we put it in the 70s. So it's due.
My question is, when were you looking to accomplish this?
We watch, it's most cost-effective when the water's down.
Okay.
And what we want to do is pay attention to it, that and contractual obligations when they can get in there and do it. The higher the water is, but that pond, believe it or not, doesn't drop too often. Even in the summertime, doesn't drop. There's an inlet that we're going to clean. It's to the left of our dry hydrant space. On your map, you can see a little line going in. It shows the inlet going to it from the left. So we're going to clean that out, make sure we have good flow out of that still. But, again, it's being served by the rainwater runoff from the catch basin in the street, as well as the pipe going in, so from the stream adjacent.
Okay, my only concern is with springtime coming is amphibians breeding, if there's a lot of disturbance to the immediate bank.
Again, one of our biggest goals is to only disturb a third of that pond.
Okay,
I mean, that's our goal, because any more than that will cost us more money, and it really doesn't serve any purpose. We're gonna clear a third of it on the left-hand side, within, the maintenance easement, which shows the two lines. And that's where we're gonna work. It'll be consistent with Bacon's Pond. If you drive by, you can still see cattails in the back, where we didn't excavate that area.
okay,
We only did the front and cleaned up the area there.
okay. Thank you.
But further of Jason's point, Kevin, if you could wait till October, you would be beyond the reproductive season for most of Connecticut's amphibians. And that would, they would.
Well, again,
They would
if
dodge
it's-
the bullet if you
Yeah,
had
I
that
mean-
flexibility.
If we get it done now, that'd even be better.
In February.
Or March, well, it's gonna be
March,
70 tomorrow.
Once you're in March, I'm looking at
Oh, okay.
Connecticut wildlife.
Yeah.
You are in the thick of breeding season for just about a good half, well,
Right.
just about everybody. And the calendar doesn't really clear until October. So if you can avoid the wildlife impact, that would be
Again,
the way to do
we'll
it.
consider everything, everything being equal, and trying to incorporate the work schedules of the contractors and the costs.
You said there is a significant cost savings if you do it when the pond is lower, obviously.
There is.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say significant, there would be a cost savings because there's less water to dewater. But like I said, I think in this particular pond, it doesn't drop substantially. So that part is not the big deal. It's whenever we can schedule the contractor. People are very busy. And if we can schedule it at a time where they have 4 days that they can do it, and they can get it done now, or to get it done, in March, or however it's gonna work, just like we did over in Terry's Plains Road. By doing that, we actually saved almost 40% on Terry's Plains, by letting him let us know when he's available to do it, and we just called. He called here, said, all right, we're setting it up, we're doing all the silt fencing and all that stuff, getting ready to go, and we're gonna do it tomorrow.
So when did you
and because
actually
they were
do
able
it?
to do that.
When did you do it on Terry's Plain? What time period?
Recall? It was late,
Late,
it was summertime.
no, it was late fall.
Was it fall? Again, I can't remember. I can't, I'd have to do that.
Remember, I want to say, it was delayed.
Actually, it was delayed because we were also using the same contract because we were working on the stone post project also, which was giving us problems. So we're also working on that pond at Stone Post, which was granted 2 years ago, I believe, to work on. 3, is it? So we had to finish that up, which we consequently did. So once he finished that, we were able to jump over to the Bacon Pond.
Is the pond functional now?
No.
No, not at all.
It's not.
Okay. So is this would it be a public safety issue?
It
Not
is. I
getting it
mean,
done?
obviously, we have no water there. In fact, one of the neighbors called to say, we need to get water here. So he was very, very concerned about it, rightfully so.
I'm sorry, you mean public drinking water?
No, fire protection.
Yeah, okay.
How long has it been out of service?
It's been out of service for over a year. Yep.
So it's been funds that have, in the process. of
Right,
getting
it's
us-
been funded, plus it was on the priority schedule, we had some other areas like the Bacon Pond, which was serving a larger area, and also the Stone Post, which was very difficult to get water up the hill, on 185. So that's a pretty, so we had to do, the priority list was that, the closest hydrant for city water is approximately, half a mile away from, Cricket Lane. So we have a fire hydrant, public water fire hydrant on the corner of Bushy Hill and Climax, and we have one right on the town line of Avon. So that's where our hydrants are located. So Cricket is almost arguably 2,000 feet down the road. So we want to get this one going as soon as possible.
So the materials that you remove from the pond, are they going to be dewatered on site or off-site or?
Again, we don't know for sure. It's going to be dependent on where we could bring it. If we do, Mike has drawn up a
Yeah.
way we're going to dewater, which is consistent with what we were setting up for Bacon's Pond on Terry's Plains.
Similar to Terry's plan, the concern is if this is saturated material, it needs to be decanted before it's
Before
loaded in
it's
the
loaded,
truck.
yes.
That Kevin's contractor and the contractor at Terry Plains, that material wasn't as wet as we
No.
anticipated, so therefore he loaded it on the truck. There was not a tracking issue or
Right.
material leaving the site. The concern is if we have saturated material and it's too wet to put into the truck, it's gotta sit and decant. There's some vegetated areas, either the grassed area you can see on the aerial photograph, I think that's 9 Cricket, that's outside of the easement. And then also areas go to Exhibit 6, to the south of the pond. It would be ideal with the contractor to put the location where he only has to move it once, where the truck can have access to it. I was suggesting close to the road. Obviously, you have a tree line and other vegetation on the road edge, so we can't just put it right off the curb line. So that's why I was suggesting on the grassed area, really just so that if this material has to bake in the sun, sitting on grass, it'll have the proper filter. That's what the handout I gave you, that's from the Vienna Stormwater Manual. This is similar, we used the similar details and suggestion with the excavation for the basketball courts at 100 Old Farms just recently. So it's just using the standard detail and letting it dry out.
Those areas are outside the easement?
To the north is outside the easement.
Yeah, we're going to try to keep inside the easement if we can. I mean, that's important to us as a holder. We're in partnership with this one, with the town, so we want to make sure that we don't go outside the easement. We have a pretty substantial easement here. I mean, the area of work for the easement is quite large, that we should be able to dewater or find an area that we can dewater in there without an issue. So we feel pretty confident about that. So, and again, we're gonna build it up, either use silt fencing or the hay bales to manage we don't want the stuff to go back into the pond either. So, I mean, that's not the way we want to do it.
So this is the method that will be used by the contractor.
Either we get it off, ideally, it's thick enough to stick in the trucks like we did on Bacon's and cart it to a farmer's field, either the same farmer or another close by person that will accept it, or dewater it and then
And
move
cart
it.
Plus, I mean, it's in Kevin's best interest since the catch basins drain into it on Cricket Lane. if the contractor's tracking sediment or slop, I don't want to call it that, or sludge, however you want to say it, from the excavation, it's only getting into the catch basin, going right back into the pond that he just did the
Right.
work. So it's in their best interest, they'll keep a clean.
Either
slate.
way, either we go into the pond or we go into the catch basin, which goes back into the pond, so we have to catch it
Back in the
somehow.
pond. Yeah, yeah. All right.
Plus, we're gonna have a fire truck there if they need it, if we have to hose it down, even if we have a track issue. 'Cause that was one of the concerns we had with Bacon's. We wanted to make sure we didn't leave a mess on the street, and then have that wash
Right
in.
back into the,
So, we were pretty fortunate there. It was clean, very, very clean. So we're hoping the same thing is gonna happen here.
do the commissioners have any further questions?
I guess I would just observe that it's regrettable that we are in the position of having to weigh the public safety on the one hand and the wildlife impact on the other. In a better budgetary situation where the schedule wasn't driven by availability or non-availability of funds, this work could have been done in the fall without the wildlife impact. And that's, to the extent that can be avoided in future cases, we are all better off.
The upcoming, the other ponds that are coming before us, has the funding been established for that?
See, the problem that we're having, to answer the question here, the problem that we have, we don't know what the cost, it's a cost-plus project. It's not a set in stone, because we sent it out to bid, and we got a cost of approximately, I believe it was $16,000 with the lowest bidder. That's how much we had budgeted for the ponds. So what we ended up doing was we had to stop on Cricket Lane Pond and then put all the resources in there. And then we determined that if we did time and material, it was a more cost-effective way to deal with it. And then we reduced the impact by only taking out 2/3 of the pond sediment. So it ended up costing us $6,000. So we had substantial savings, so now I could take that money, put it towards Cricket Lane Pond immediately, so to speak. So we're doing that now, and then hopefully in May, we're requesting more funding to do High Ridge. So that will be in effect. So that's how we'll have to do it. If we save money, I mean, if we don't spend more than $10,000 in this particular pond, then we'll have money for High Ridge. But I don't think we'll be able to do High Ridge for a small amount. We're gonna have to use the May money, which would put us into the fall period to dredge that pond up on High Ridge. And that's gonna be a pretty substantial project, because we have some trees in the way, and it's an old piping system that we may have to replace that too.
I'm looking forward to the other ponds, if we can sort of think about doing, sort of schedule them.
Well, certainly, we'll keep that under consideration, obviously,
Wonderful.
based on the comments that you've given me tonight.
Good.
So we'll do that, yeah.
Do we have is there any particular species of a frog or amphibian, I think you said, that's endangered there, or that a population wouldn't be able to recover from?
You know,
I understand
I'll
it's
be
just
honest with you, we didn't do any study.
No, and I
Is there
think
something in
all-
particular?
All
I'm
of the
just
frogs
curious.
are having a tough time, but, the wood frogs will start breeding in another month, and then it'll go on to the green frogs and the
I can
bullfrogs
show
and the,
you
all the
breeding
different-
schedule if you like.
Yeah.
Mike, do you
No,
know
I understand the
if
breeding
this-
schedule, I'm just wondering if he's only doing 2/3 of the pond anyway, if it's really a significant impact to their breeding, to the population, to anything that, that, we're talking about firewater to a family, if we're not, to homes over there, if they're not, I understand it's gonna interrupt a breeding cycle for a year, we haven't done it in the 70s, I don't anticipate this will need to be done again in the near
Oh, it
future.
will need to be done for a while, yeah.
And if we're not causing significant harm to any specific population of anything, I understand that there are frogs that won't breed this particular season, but we're not impacting the overall population, that I'm not sure it's,
I don't
the
know
cost
that,
benefit.
honestly.
that was my question, if you had.
Right, and I don't have an answer for that.
Is this a NDDB area? Do we know?
I don't know offhand. I know to the south, there's a pocket on Climax Road in Avon. I don't recall one in that area. I remember that from the Climax Road application.
This pond was built for this application. So,
Be unfortunate if an invasive species moved in,
what's that?
or if a endangered species moved in.
So there's no eviction process?
They don't know who built it.
There's no signage we can use? No. remove?
To the left. I was just curious.
Construction zone.
Something specific we're concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, that may be a useful or important condition to add to any approval would be a review of NDDB areas and work around any species identified.
I honestly, I don't know if that's something we want to do. I thought you had something specific in mind that we were concerned about and being new. I just wanted to understand what the thing, I mean, it's a pond and the people need water. I don't want to hold up unnecessarily. I really just wanted to understand what the concerns were over what we were actually talking about.
So Jim, what do you think about that going forward? I mean, or for this particular application?
Well, I think for this particular application, yeah.
And going forward,
And going
if any
forward, yeah.
ponds coming before us, we should see whether there are any species of special concern.
Well, I'm not sure. We're talking about firewater.
No, you're right. I mean, this is needs to be done. I mean, this one's been waiting for a year and a half. I mean,
This is,
you know,
yeah,
if-
so I
if
don't want
the
to hold it
budget-
up for this.
If the
because
budget
I
had
asked.
been there, we could have done it in a time that was probably, you know, have less impact.
Without disagreeing with Commissioner Morrison's point, I would say that the natural diversity database is an incomplete indicator. If you really want to be serious, you'd require a scientist to look at the pond in question and make a judgment about what breeds there and what lives there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, a review of the database is kind of a compromise
Yep.
solution, I think. It's a partial solution, yeah.
So, but what are we saying we would do? We would not dredge the pond then? And not, so then we need a solution for
Well,
firewater
if there is
to these people?
if there's a species of special concern that's using the pond, then they may require a specific month or two that the fire department could work around, rather than waiting until October. They may not be able to do the work in June, but, would have to wait until July, for example.
Helping.
Depending on the species, if there is a species.
Who's gonna tell us where these, if I may, through the chair?
If there's a
Who's gonna tell me that?
there's a map that
Okay.
Mike can point you to,
So-
and that
so Mike's gonna show me a map that
Mike's gonna
says
go
what
get the map.
animals
and
are
it'll
in
tell
it?
you
Yeah.
if you're in an area.
Oh,
That
okay.
map will tell you if you're in an area, and if you are, then you have to request the state to provide that information to you. It'll
The
tell
state?
you.
But the state, that's
the
gonna take, I mean,
the
we're already at.
state-
The DEP,
DEP.
Mike can get this on the phone.
Mike's just gone to get the map, so we can clear that up. No, I agree, we don't want to hold it up, it is a public safety
No, I
issue.
mean,
But
you know.
going forward, for the ones that we do know
Well, certainly
are
going
on the
forward, then
schedule,
we'll react to that.
Yeah. Is the funding in place for the others, or is
Not
it
yet.
on
No,
a?
Again, it's dependent, we haven't let this out
How
to
much
bid
money this
because we
one
don't know
costs? Yeah.
what, any processes that we'll have to do extra.
Are the other ponds as in bad shape as the one?
High Ridge is really the one that we're working on. Oakhurst was worked on not too long ago. We're gonna take a look at that one. The one on Bushy Hill Road is in fairly good shape. We have 9, so they're in fairly good shape. We don't wanna let this go for 30 years anymore, once.
No,
the
so
cattails
it's
start.
become more of an issue that, routine maintenance for
Yes,
these instead of
yes.
critical maintenance.
Correct.
And this pond was built for this purpose, and this is
Absolutely.
what this is.
That and
for,
drainage for the
correct?
street.
Does have a hit through the area, but this is the hit, what I think it is, because we have documentation on that. It's a bat that was observed in Avon, in that area.
So they don't use
So it's not
ponds.
even a species that was observed in Simsbury. And like I said, I'm only saying that from the affordable housing application down the road.
All right, so no amphibian species.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments from the commissioners? I would entertain a motion.
I will make a motion that we find that this is a regulated activity because the proposed work is within wetland.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion that we find that this is not a significant impact activity because of the limited area that will be disturbed and the appropriate handling of the dredged materials that we discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And I'll make a motion that we approve the application, subject to the special conditions and standard conditions in the staff report.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you in a couple months.
All right. All right, moving on to new business, receipt of new applications.
We have no applications. Staff was part of a scoping meeting today for One Old Bridge. You may be seeing an application in the upcoming months for One Old Bridge involving the demolition of the existing structure and some of the park improvements. There was a concept planned a while ago. So that project is slowly coming forward. So I think maybe, I would guess June, May, June, you'll see an application for that. But today was our kickoff meeting with the consultant to proceed. We've been waiting on funds from FEMA for recouping the demolition costs for the structure. We just received an executed agreement with FEMA. But we're also scheduling a meeting with DEP to see whether any state permits are required for that project prior to coming to this commission. So, then the other thing, it's not an application, it's a request. I was approached by Community Farm there's some fields that are to the south of the dump that, if you're familiar with the transfer station, it's in the back where there's it's kind of like a stump dump. I don't use the term, but there's vegetation. Everyone brings their brush back there. There's a field that's directly behind it, not the one that's far up by the river, but it's just off the edge of where the kind of pile of brush is. They want to install some fencing along the perimeter of this area. It's mapped wetlands, unfortunately. They've changed their plans, and it's just a deer fencing that involves putting in some garden stakes, metal garden stakes, and 2 wires with some small posts that will go, like they are described as fiber rod posts between the garden stakes. Technically, it's construction and disturbance of earth within a regulated area. So my question to the commission is, do you want to require a permit for this, or should I ask them to come in to determine whether this is an as-of-right activity associated with the agricultural practices out there, or would you consider this a regulated activity? They're prepared to file a permit if the commission requires one for this, because this is associated with a grant they're applying for farm restoration of some of the fields.
Seems to me the question is whether we regard it as an as-of-right activity under the agriculture exemption, and if we do, then no permit would be required. But I think they would need to make the submission to us of the necessary information on the basis of which we could make that judgment.
We can see a map.
As
of
the
where-
host to many deer, I will venture the further opinion that 2 wires ain't gonna do it.
Agreed. I told them I would ask you tonight, so what I'll tell Ms. Perry to plan on attending your meeting in the next 2 weeks.
That'd be good.
Robin Newton will be at that meeting, and I think Jamie, because I will not be here. So I'll get them up to speed on this situation.
So that's it for new applications.
Yeah.
General Commission business, approval of minutes for February 6th, the last meeting. Does anyone have any additions or changes to the minutes?
I do.
Oh, anyone? Don?
Jim, are you comfortable with what you are said to be saying in lines 94 and 5? I didn't know what that meant, so I wondered if you had said it.
My recollection is a bit hazy here. Down 94, 95.
You're talking about habitat diversity, or?
Well, I think the desire for a result that is not a monolithic habitat is consistent with what I was saying. I mean, the first part about a broader sense of management, I don't remember what that is. So I'm okay with
Okay,
it
then.
as is.
All right, all right. Not very good. All right, so we'll file those as they are, all right. Simsbury Meadows,
Just a carryover from last month, I just wanted to remind the commission that the director is supposed to be at your next meeting.
good, good. And,
I didn't want to lose that agenda item for you, since you've
Thank
asked
you.
that.
all right, and Bob DiCrescenzo, is he going to be speaking to us at some point, or no?
That's,
That's
the director.
not on our,
Took the lead on that, so I'm not really good at the conversations lately on that.
all right. All right, we look forward to it next month. Forest managing discussion and workshop, all right. So, workshop, do we have any public comment? Any discussion from the public? No, no, all right.
I had an email from the public, Madam Chairman, if you'd
All
like me
right,
to.
good.
This is from a person who lives in town, who is a science educator, who watched the meeting before last on television and was reminded of Mr. Faison or Fison? Faison? Mr. Faison's presentation.
Faison?
Faison, Mr. Faison's presentation, relating to the wildlands and woodlands materials. And this person comments that it is obvious that the vision is not, obviously not a no-cut, hands-off management vision for the majority of conserved woodland. And goes on to quote the vision, which says, this is a quotation, "The wildlands and woodlands vision calls for retaining and permanently protecting at least 70% of the landscape, parenthesis 30 million acres, close parenthesis, in forest land, and another 7%, 2.8 million acres, in farmland by 2060. Most of the forests would be managed as woodlands for wood products and other benefits, while at least 10%, 3 million acres, would be designated as wildland reserves. Such a landscape with interconnected natural and cultural infrastructure would support and enrich the lives of New Englanders and provide the capacity for nature and society to adapt to future environmental change." This person goes on to say that following that television program, I perused the Onion Mountain Management Plan and could see no evidence that it was focused on logging or that it neglected managing for wildlife. It seems that if logging was the entire goal, there wouldn't be 20 years between cuts. I also don't understand why we need to be so specific about how we are managing, about what we are managing for, since there will be change in the future from climate change. We need to manage for resilience. One,
What was that last word?
resilience.
You need to
Resilience.
Manage for resilience.
manage for?
Resilience.
Thank you.
So, one other public opinion.
Is it necessary to have the public opinion person's name?
I did not ask this person's permission to give his or her name, so I'm reluctant to do so.
All right, all right.
Was,
Makes it interesting.
question, please?
Yeah.
I'm sort of familiar with the wildlands and woodlands, somewhat. It's quite an expensive document, so, program. When you were reading, Don, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand, when you were reading off the statistics as to how that program looks at the whole New England area and says, you know, percentage for this and a percentage for that and so forth. I can understand that in the context of a scientific approach to how you would apportion certain kinds of uses for an entirety of an area and a region. But when you look at the specific small areas, like private ownership, say up in Massachusetts, there's an awful lot of private land there, open woodlands, private ownership there rather than in municipal or land trusts. When you look at the subsets, let's call it that, and then you have different individuals who are responsible for that particular kind of caretaking. Say the private owner, he's the only one there that has to worry about it or what he wants to do with it. Let's say within the land trust or the municipal area or state area, you have another entity who takes over the role of caretaker. Then they have to look at the specific area that they are in charge of. And my thinking is that when you look at that specific area, you can't really literally apply the percentages that you apply to a whole region. You have to look at what you have. You have to see how it presents itself, what are the characteristics of a particular parcel, what are its unique features, how do they particularly behave with the parcel next door, because it may not be yours, it belongs to the state, or it belongs to a private owner, or it belongs to another town. You have connectiveness, and you don't have forests that have town lines. Okay, so I'm just trying to say those percentages that are presented for the greater region, New England, don't necessarily apply to, in the same way, to, let's say, a small piece of that. And I feel that you have to really be sure that you understand and you know what your purview is, understand and thoroughly assess it, and then see how you will portion out. Yeah, you have a guideline, that's what the goal was for the Harvard plan, but then you present your own guidelines and you put it into perspective, into focus within that parcel. I hope I made myself understood.
But just,
That's just I'm winging it,
well, I think your point was is that you can't apply aggregate percentages down to small parcels, and so you just
It's a guide, it's a guideline,
Right. Yeah. So yes, I think you're right. You can't take 5 acres and cut it up into 3%.
But I think you need to look at the individual parcel in context of the region.
Mhm.
And the region has the wildlands and woodlands guidelines to it. So if everything else is being harvested and you have a little plot in the middle, maybe that's part of the 10% that you don't do anything to.
I think it's, the 10%, and I think some of the forest ecologists have been arguing for more than 10%. But some of the, there's some other interests that would like more. I mean, wood products are very are a necessary component of our economy and well-being. But you're right. And how many one might ask, how many of Connecticut's woodlands have been set aside as wildlands? Are there any that we know of?
Not to my knowledge.
I don't think there are.
That's a definitional question, I suppose. I mean, if a land trust owns a piece of property and it has done nothing to manage it and does not plan to do anything to manage it, it may not have designated it as a
No.
wildland, but it's functioning in that capacity.
Although it has the potential to manage it in the future.
So can I ask how often we do this, this happens again too?
We
What they're
haven't,
doing, this harvesting now here on the Indian Mountain proposal, how often does this happen?
we haven't. I mean, there has been some log, have there been?
About 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
And do we anticipate doing it again, or is this again something that's every 20 years if we would do it again?
The parcels of the forestry management plans you have were all logged previously about, say, 20 to 30 years ago. I can't, and Erica's, the forester, their firm, I think, actually was involved with the previous plans. So this is kind of like a 20-year, 30-year cycle that came back.
And I know McLean's, I just met the new executive director, whatever they call him, for the McLean's, and I know that they're reviewing their plans, looking to see how they're going to be managing the forest going forward. I know the same forester who did our management plans has been doing work with them, but, it'll be interesting to see what they're doing.
The state is finishing up on Great Pond, and we've heard notifications they're to start on the parcel to the east of Onion Mountain off of West Mountain, Misako State Forest. That's part of the, it's included in the Misako Forest Management Plan that was shared with the commission.
And I think what we have is a philosophical difference. It's not that we disagree, we all love the forest, but we've had a lot of comments from the public and some of the commissioners that while there's nothing wrong, there is much that's good in the Onion Mountain Management Plan. It just might be the cart before the horse. We might be a little premature. We haven't established what we want from the town for our forest. It may very well be that the management plan is the one we go with, but until we know what we want, I know I thought, Charles, you did a good job on your letter, putting forward that I know I received a letter from Susan Messino and Helen Peterson, a correction of my, edits of my letter, and they make very good points as to the fact that the town really hasn't established, other than conservation and recreation, what we want from our forests. And I think before we do that, it's premature to go out, even though we've done it 20 years ago, it's premature, I think, to go in and just because we have a plan, we need to do it. And the plan is very well guided, but I think it behooves us to take the time and bring in as many people as, can be to look at it and make that determination. I don't think it's really our...
What do you want to do tonight?
I don't know. We've got 3 different letters. I hate group editing. I like your letter. I think the points that Helen Peterson and Susan Messina make are good ones. I don't know how would the commission like to proceed? I don't think we need to apologize to anyone for taking our time to do this.
I would start with a question as to, because I had not seen the rewrite of your letter, Madam Chairman, but the original version of it recited that we were responding to a request from the Board of Selectmen. And I have no recollection of such a referral.
No,
I think
it's
the only
wrong.
referral that we've received is the one I was asked to carry back from the Open
It's for
Space
Onion Mountain.
Committee.
We've expanded our, in this discussion, we've expanded it beyond that, because we did get into some of the other management plans. But you're right, the only one we were asked for was Onion Mountain.
Well, no, what we were asked specifically about Onion Mountain was whether we stand by the 2014 approval we gave, which was a wetlands approval and quite narrow.
True.
That was the question, which we
True.
have never answered, although the question was posed to us some months ago. We have never answered that question.
No, we haven't. However, we got sort of beyond it and backed up. And because we had comments from the public interested in this topic, we have expanded our discussion to say perhaps it's premature to talk about what, specific tactic we're using to manage the forest and look at the management in general. Now, Mike Payne's here tonight. Do you think we are off the mark if we recommend to the Board of Selectmen that we form a task committee to look at this question in more detail, rather than take each parcel as an isolated piece, to come up with a plan for what the town has? I mean, we spent a lot of money on these pieces of property. I would think it would take, it behooves us to take a time to look at this and, beyond our inland wetlands capacity, we are a conservation commission. So wearing that hat, I think we should be able to expand beyond whether or not the wetland aspect of that management plan was appropriate.
To your question, Madam Chairman, taking time to do it right, I think is the appropriate thing to do. If you were trying to get this done for this April's budget season, then I would say we're too late. Because in 2 weeks, we're starting our budget, and the stuff's already in the pipeline coming to us. I think at this point, taking the time to do it right and getting consensus from your board as to what you want, as long as you don't create a process that never gets an outcome. And I've heard everyone's frustration with trying to get this done.
Yeah.
And it's always a balance to get it done, but not get it done too quickly, or have it take forever.
Yeah.
So, those are the words of wisdom I have, and
And we
I'm now
have the
done.
two schools of thought, so let's hold off and let's do it right now.
I think this board should be a sounding board as the Inland Wetlands Commission and Conservation Commission. You kind of have two hats. And I'd like to think you don't come out with two different positions, which
Well,
would
we
be
could very
really
well
horrible.
say, we very well could say that the wetlands aspect of Onion Mountain Plan was fine, but we would like to, have the town, take a moment to reflect on what it wants from those woodlands.
And I think it's what do you want the outcome to be? And, I will tell you my personal opinion, not as a member of the Board of Selectmen. I'm also chairman of the Board of Trustees for McLean's. We had a horrible incident today in McLean's. A family was out walking, and one of the young ladies, one of the children, got hit by a tree limb or a tree that fell, and she got taken to the hospital. So that is exactly what I am afraid of in one of our forests, that we don't proactively do what we can so that people don't get hurt by something falling from a tree.
But is that something that would have actually been preventable? I know I walk every day in the woods at the nature center, and I'm always horrified when I see, in the morning I've walked the trail, in the afternoon I come back and there's something along the trail.
Yeah.
And, the windstorms, various, it's,
To the extent we can prevent it, we
Yeah.
should try to.
yeah, well, that's around the trails.
And that's on the trails, and it can look like it's 10 feet off and end up in the trail.
That's right.
But my point is, I think if we're going to have, again, my personal opinion, if we're going to have paths or trails in the woods, we should do what we can to make sure that they are reasonably safe
Well,
to
that's-
the extent we can. And if we're going to have those paths, then we need to not leave dead men hanging. And it's a term, it's not.
No.
Not trying to
No
offend anybody.
widowmakers, no widowmakers, no.
No widowmakers, that's
Yeah.
far better.
Yes, yeah, maybe.
Well, yes, okay. Somebody's gotta help me with another word.
No, that's what they're called.
Something that's gonna fall and hurt somebody.
No, absolutely.
And to the
That's-
extent we can, we should try to.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone here is
No.
suggesting
Absolutely not,
anything other than that.
so,
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of area not near the trails. So.
thank you.
All right, so we're still, we could do it in a two-pronged fashion. We could approve the sedimentation or the wetlands aspect of the management plan, but still put forward a letter saying that prior to any of that actual action, that we could, we would like to take 6 months further to, get a group together to see if we can't come up with some policies for the town, maybe as a subcommittee or a task force, interested public and commissioners and others, experts, to see if we can't move this forward, perhaps not always in our committee meetings. I know some members find it tedious.
Is there a, I'm sorry, I'm a little lost with respect to the revisions of the letters and the extra letters that we have. Could
Well, that's- we have about
Could you
4.
just clarify what?
We have 4. I
what
wrote
exactly we
one.
have?
Don wrote a different
Well,
one.
it's not always clear who wrote what.
If you look
but
down,
there's
there's an MW or a.
One to the Open Space Committee is mine.
Peterson and Sam Messina took my letter and rewrote it.
Okay, so
I
this
have
is,
mine
this is
here,
the
and then
second
Charles
draft
has
of
his.
this letter?
No, that's Charles.
Point of information, if I may ask, did I just
Charles.
hear that he said there's one to the Open Space Committee?
That's one that Don wrote. Don wrote one.
It's
to
a
the-
draft.
It's a draft.
It's a draft, written, but it's addressed to the Open Space Committee?
Okay, so maybe I have 2 copies of that.
Oh,
letter.
thank you. That won't be meeting until
So,
April.
Okay, and so
Doesn't
you're,
matter, this may never see the
This
light
is-
of day.
this February
Purely
7th
draft.
letter is not updated, or it was
no,
updated?
I had one, and this is the one with, Susan Messina and Helen Peterson sent me their comments. I don't know where mine is.
Okay. And then Charles' letter.
Then Charles.
Okay. Okay, so those are the 3 letters.
4. 4 letters. I had one, Helen Peterson had one, Don had one, and Susan.
This is Helen Peterson's letter.
And
This is not.
Charles had one.
I only have 2 letters.
Okay, okay. So that one, I don't
Yeah, I
think
only have 2
saw.
letters here.
Oh, I see, this is written by someone.
Oh, okay.
This
Here's
is,
Charles, here's Charles.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
I know it should be mine.
There's supposed to be 4.
that's not the
That's the second
notes.
page of this, that's the
The-
second page of this. That's Charles.
Okay. There are 2 different dates on those, though.
That's fine.
This is separate from this.
That's a continuation.
Ah, that one.
This is the letter, these are the comments.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second page of it.
These are his,
I
that's
don't
his
have that one.
explanation of why he wrote that.
That's the first page.
Okay, so there's okay, and there's a letter to the Open Space Committee. There's a letter to the first selectman. I'm still only at 3 letters.
But there should be one from me, it should say MW at the bottom.
There, was that one revised, though?
Oh, I sent it, this is
Or was that the one that was sent around?
I sent it 2 weeks ago.
This is Heather's.
That one's different from this one.
Several months ago is Marjorie's original letter.
Well, it's not several months ago, it was on the 7th.
No, the one that reads
Okay.
several months ago.
Oh, yes,
As a
all right,
first line.
yes.
That reads, yes,
The
okay.
one that reads
And that one's several years
ago
think
is Susan Messina and Helen Peterson.
And then the other 2 began several months ago.
We all do.
We have a distinctive
Are
style.
there 2 that begin several months ago? Oh,
Yes.
that's Charles's.
Charles's and yours both begin several months.
But this
This
is,
is Don's,
but that, even though it says,
but why does it say Marjorie at the end, just because Don put it there?
Your agreement on
Yes,
the
just
style,
That's what I don't
at the
have.
beginning of the letter.
Well, I was working off Marjorie's.
and where's
started.
Marjorie's?
But we don't have to go with several months
Helen
ago.
Peterson. And this one is,
I love group writing.
That one's mine.
okay, so I don't have Marjorie's.
Okay. I suggest we pick one and
Either.
focus on that first.
Okay, perfect.
And I have not, I haven't read at least two of these.
I haven't read Charles.
So-
I haven't seen two
So
of these
if we
before
haven't
tonight,
read
so-
them, I would suggest that we table this until next meeting, however exciting that is. If,
Well, if there's,
So I just received.
And you just received them tonight.
all of them tonight, so.
so, yeah,
So I
the
actually.
one that you wrote, though,
Yes, to the Open Space Committee,
it dated February 20th.
tonight, yes.
But that was, it was drafted earlier.
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that one I did, okay, yeah. So that one and yours are the two that we had earlier.
Yeah, those are the two that I've read.
Okay, that I've read, yeah. Okay, so Charles, I have not read, and Susan and Helen's I have not read yet. Okay.
so I think it's very difficult to edit something we haven't read. So I would recommend that we do
Start.
this next meeting, or what?
Or start with one of the two that we have read.
Well, Marjorie, you
Unless
said
they're
that you
conflicting.
spoke well of Susan and Helen's. Does that supersede yours or not?
No, they had seen my letter, and they made substantive comments on it. And I thought it would be best to have them, this is a letter from them for consideration as well.
Okay, so yours stands as well, okay?
Mine needs corrections. So, Since we will not be reading them here, I would say we should look at them and find the parts that you like and don't like, and come together next time prepared to discuss them. Does that, or write your own.
Well,
You might have five.
Really?
Well, I mean, I think we can,
Or six.
I think if, Dawn's letter we've had, so everyone should have had a chance to read that.
Mine.
Yours
I
we've
just-
read, yours may conflict or be superseded by.
No,
by
I think
Helen?
they're said differently. There's some additional information, and I think in Helen and Susan Messina's, they state very strongly their things, and they've corrected me on several items.
So we could potentially send both letters, or we wouldn't send both letters?
Well, that's a possibility. We could send both letters, but one's coming from the Conservation Commission, and one could be coming from Helen Peterson and Susan Messina. But I think it's, we're making a recommendation to the town, so I think it's more effective coming from us. But I think they raise good points, too.
I mean, if they want to send their own, they're welcome to.
They're more than welcome to, but I think
their
it's
decision.
best coming from the
I'm
commission.
not catching all of that, but I do have one question, if I may. Don, I just read your draft to the Open Space Committee.
Yes.
Just reading it through one time, so I hope I'm reading it correctly. I can only comment to the fact that we received in October of 2014 a letter from town attorney, and at that time, he said that the Open Space Committee no longer had the purview, would no longer have the purview of looking at Onion Mountain or any other plan, as far as that really was under stewardship, and that would be the purview only of your commission here, the Conservation Commission. That's why you were directed to deliver, as a representative of this commission, you were asked to deliver that directive to your commission here, that you review the Onion Mountain plan, because it was literally taken away from one and given to the other. That was my interpretation at that time.
With respect, Helen, I was given the charge of delivering that
Yes.
referral in 2016.
The fall of 2016,
Okay, there was no mention at that meeting of a letter from the
It
town
was given
attorney.
out. I got my copy at that meeting, and it's dated October 2016. And it was read into the meeting, and it was discussed. Did you not Were you going to be there?
I do not recall the particular date at which I was given this charge.
But you're familiar with the letter?
I'm not,
You are not.
correct. So if more was intended by the referral, it is more than what was understood by me at the time I took that responsibility to bring the
No,
message
I'm
here.
just trying to relate my interpretation of how that took place. In that, we were no longer going to be asked to have that responsibility. It was going to be only yours here in this commission, and that,
That was the Conservation Commission.
I'm sorry?
That was the Conservation Commission.
yes,
Not
your
just the
commission.
inland wetlands, yes. Not just inland wetlands, it was Conservation Commission.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, trying to remember as carefully as I can that meeting. Yes, that's my recollection, that after we received this letter from the town attorney and the responsibilities were transferred, that's when the request as representative there that you give that job to your commission here. I could, stand corrected, but that's my recollection.
You and I have different understandings, but
Oh,
that's
and-
fine.
And I would make one other little remark to that, one other little thing. When you said earlier, just this evening, something about, how did you say it? That this commission was never asked by the Board of Selectmen to review the plan. But I remember it coming to the Open Space Committee. Staff was there. It came to the Open Space Committee, the chair, who is the first selectman, that's the way it was represented. We were to review it and to respond. So then when it was transferred, that's what I'm trying to put together in my head. So when the responsibility was transferred by virtue of this letter from town attorney, that's when you assumed that responsibility of responding to the Board of Selectmen about the Onion Mountain Plan and whether or not it should be executed at this time or at that time. So I think I've brought it around.
I guess I should have to review the minutes, Helen.
Sure.
I may say that I perhaps I've got this entirely wrong, but my recollection has been
Yeah.
that the Onion Mountain Plan came up because I brought it up at the Open Space Committee, asking whatever happened to the Onion Mountain Plan,
Correct.
why wasn't it carried out?
I can remember that.
And it began at the Open Space Committee on that basis, and my understanding at the time was I was asked to go back to Conservation, or Inland Wetlands, if you will, reconfirm their 2014 rubber stamping of it from a inland wetlands point of view. I do not recall anything having gone to the Board of Selectmen and coming back to the Open Space Committee, but I'll review the minutes.
Was it coming back to us because our approval had expired, or what, why was it coming back to us?
I took it as a belt and suspenders sort of action on the First Select Lady's part. She was aware that we had approved it, but it had been a couple of years before, and wanted to make sure that approval was still there so that it could be moved on further.
And the approval was from the inland wetlands or from the Conservation Commission?
Inland wetlands, if you see what's in my letter.
I saw what's in your letter, but I was wondering whether
So
but under the lawyers,
The
Letter.
issue with the inland wetlands that you're referring to would never have come before the Open Space Committee. Remember my speaking to you two meetings ago, in that I had reread and read all the minutes and found some of the thread of activity and found some answers, and that I was going to try to do something about it. I am, and I've already done it. I have created an outline of that information, and I'm presenting it to the selectmen, because that's who we are supposed to do. But I was waiting for the meeting. I was waiting to put that into the agenda of our next meeting, formally, number one. I was going to present it as an outline and suggestion, because we have the new makeup of the Open Space Committee. We have 3 new members now as a result of the charter revision. And then I looked at your commission, and I'm saying you're gonna have 4 new members. And so I thought it would be the opportune time to really come to bring that picture forward and see if we couldn't straighten things out to a good outcome and to the, for the town in general. And thank you for your patience, thank you for listening. But that's my thought. I am following up. I told you that I was going to do this, and I am doing it, but it's timing that is the question here.
Would it be possible I would like to see a copy of your outline, if that's possible, for my own historical.
It has not gone to the Board of Selectmen
So
first.
you're going-
I'm sending it officially
Okay.
to our chair, who is the first selectman.
Yeah.
They can then share it, and this is what I had suggested in the outline, that it be shared with this commission. It's done, it's just a matter of timing. So, and we're not meeting again until the first week of April.
So we have time to look, we'll have time to look at it at our next meeting?
I'm saying that I am officially, okay, I may move it up. I'll officially get it to the chair of the Open Space Committee, let's say 1 week from today.
All right.
Okay, I've got it ready, it just needs to be typed in a nice looking format, but it is ready.
All right.
So I will be sure that they have it within a week, and then if they want to share it, if the first selectman, who is our chair, wants to share it with you before we meet in April, I'll leave it up to him.
All right, yeah, if you could,
Because I don't know if that's, you see, again, it's timing,
It's timing, yeah, it is.
and I'm trying to do it
By
a good way.
By the way, yeah. Well, if the chairman does feel that he can share it.
I'll ask you, I will be sure to ask.
All right, thank you. All right.
So, for the people that have been reading at least pieces of the different letters, do we think we're zeroing in on a message, and it's just a question of how do we get the message across, or we think we're diverging on the message?
Well, we have I think we have the message from the Conservation Commission and Don's message from the Inland Wetlands Commission, which I didn't really think we were.
Yeah, well,
addressing.
I think those are 2 different questions. Right. Are they done?
Well, no, my point was that I wasn't aware that the question had been officially put to the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
And if we have done this on our own initiative, that's fine. If we have done it on our own initiative, we shouldn't begin the letter to the Board of Selectmen reciting that we're responding to a referral that I don't think has occurred.
I think we were just asked to do Onion Mountain, but.
So I think that's fine, and I think that's a reasonable correction to make, but given that there's, so I was thinking about the macro plan we're spending a lot of time on, which is the forestry note, and I guess, outside of cleaning up pieces, do we think have we gotten to the point where we think it's cleaning up the language and the messaging, or do we think we still have different opinions out here? And if we don't know the answer now, that's fine, but that's one of the things we should come back with by next week.
Well, I think I have one different opinion.
Okay.
Which is, I don't know that I think there should be a need for a task force. I mean, if I were the Board of Selectmen and someone asked me to set up a task force to deal with this, I would say, we have a task force for that. It's called the Conservation Commission.
Mhm.
So I don't understand handing this over to a yet-to-be-established body to deal with this question, because we should be able to deal with it. Pretty clear we don't agree on major aspects of it, but I don't know that a task force would agree on major aspects of it either.
We might also agree on major aspects of it. We might agree that, I don't know, would we disagree that mean, setting aside the Onion Mountain plan, that it would be worthwhile to look at how our properties fit in with the other properties and the management plans for the other properties, from what we know of them, and establish a philosophy and goals for the woodlands that we own. Are we in disagreement about that?
But, I agree. I mean, I think there were a lot of points of agreement that we've had. I don't know that that's one of them, but I think we can step back.
We don't
and-
need goals, or?
That we can't review the forest management plans in the absence of, townwide philosophy.
And I stand with Commissioner Morrison on that. I don't think we need a philosophy. I haven't thought we needed a philosophy
Interesting.
all along.
Interesting.
And I think also, given the struggles that we've had with bringing it together, I think it might help us move forward to not have that.
Well, there is a disagreement. All right, and I thought Charles did a good job of setting it forward.
Well, I haven't read Charles's letter, so,
Well, then,
but your
I think
letter,
we're talking in a vacuum here. I think we need to read all the letters and the comments.
I think
before we go
that-
forward.
well, I mean, I think that there are, some points that I think that we have agreed on, and things that we have learned that we would agree on. And I think that the foremost point that, at least that I've learned through this discussion, is that the goals that are established in the management plans, I think everyone has agreed, and the forester has said this, and all of the other experts have said this, that it is the responsibility of the town to determine what those goals are. And, I think any letter that we send that is a summary of our consensus should begin with that point.
What, the goals in the management plan?
That the goals are to be established by the town, the people of the town.
That's what that's what we were, yes.
But I
Right,
think,
no, I think that's an important point
Yeah.
of consensus for our commission, and I think that should be one of the first things in any letter that we write to, summarize our opinion.
do we not think that the goals that are in the plan were the ones that the town fed to the forester, though?
The town fed to the forester.
Every time I've been party to a forest management plan, the forester sits down with you and says, what are your goals for this? And you say, well, forest health, this and that. I have made the assumption, I had assumed correctly, that these were not something that Eric Hansen dreamed up, that these were the result of a dialogue he had with the town starting out. It's always done that way, in my experience, and I presumed that it was.
Well, and I would say, Don, that obviously it was very close, because as we went through all of our discussions, we said that we actually found most of those to be in common with what we were thinking. But it was very clear early in our discussions, with everybody, that there was a lot of debate about what those meant. And people were reading those relatively small lines and coming up with different interpretations of what that meant. And so I kind of agree with you. I don't think we need a task force to address some of these questions. But it definitely needs by the time you get done with this, you should be able to write it down fairly distinctly as to what you think the overall strategic goals are and how you're achieving it. Now, you did that well, Don, on that one, when you consolidated those things down to a few lines. I think those actually do a good job of summarizing it.
Which? Where?
Remember we'd asked.
4 iterations ago.
Yeah, 4 iterations.
So hard to keep track.
But actually, those are the ones actually I put right in my.
Are they in yours? 'Cause
Yeah.
actually, I would like to know.
Yeah.
It's actually, this is Don's consolidation of my 2 pages of work here, into 4 lines, and so I put them in, but so it's interesting, Jim, what you're saying. So I guess, so my question was, do we think, are we just working on improving the message back, or we have some other things that we're sort of agreeing and disagreeing on. And I think what we should come back with for next week is that list of, here's the things I agree and disagree on, and here are the things we ought to fix to improve the message. Don's example of, we definitely need to fix the title of this thing, like we're responding to a comment when
Yeah,
that isn't
yeah,
the case.
that's
We need to fix that.
Easy.
But if we don't have agreement that what we need is a task force, that was kind of the bottom line of Marjorie's letter, that you go through these various iterations, and the bottom line is, please, mesdames and messieurs, select persons, give us a task force.
Well, and so I think, so I think these different letters we have coming up are actually kind of bringing these things out, because I would disagree that we need a task force. I would say we need to go back and processes, I said in my letter, we need two kinds of processes that may already be there. One is to figure out how to deal with the stewardship issue, just how you're saying the goals. There's another one to figure out how to deal with just the local tactical stuff. How do we do trail maintenance? Are we all set to do that? The things that we don't need to do big stuff, we don't need to hold everything up to solve bigger issues. And I think those processes are already there. And if they're already there and they can be nailed down exactly, then we know who to go talk to about it.
But we also have, some fundamental discussions about what we mean by management. I mean, there's.
And so my question is, I don't think that needs to go in the letter back to the selectmen. It only has to say that we think we need a group that can resolve this.
Well, that's a task force group. The question is, and I know I got a lot of pushback last week saying that this was a tedious process, and indeed it is, that what are we doing this for? And I think we're doing it because we're trying to figure out how to handle this thing that has been put into our laps. And we do have disagreements among ourselves. It might be good to open it up and get, additional input from at the time we were dealing with this, there were four of us. We will be getting new members. We've had public input. There are other people out there that also are interested, the open space, anybody, these are not just our forests. We can give our opinions.
Okay, so we have a mission then. So the mission is to go back, look at these different pieces, come back with, if you can say, no, this is the part I really disagree with, then we can have a discussion on that next week. And I would say, and what I want to get done is I want to figure out the parts that we really agree and disagree on, decide what needs to go in the letter, and then get the actual letter, written up clearly the way it should be.
For me, the threshold question is, why do we need a letter? What are we, the last time I handed a letter to the first selectman, he said, what does this want me to do?
Mhm.
And if we don't, if all we're saying is we want you to appreciate how much we've anguished over this.
No.
I don't think that's
No,
it.
No, I think
We need to
the
decide
town needs a policy. What does it want to do with these forests? Does it just want to, do some, isolated management plan that fits all the best management practices? That's fine, but, it does go beyond. It does go on to a regional level. It does go on to the woodlands and wildlands. Are we considering these as simply, what tactics do we want to achieve? Do we, are there species that we're interested in preserving in the town? Are the suites of species? Are we interested in developing one habitat over another? What exactly are we doing with these forests?
Well, can
I
I-
don't think it takes,
Sorry, I didn't mean to-
yes,
I just had a question, because this is because I'm new.
yes.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what exactly we're tasked with first,
Well,
which
that
I
would
understand,
be
which is
nice.
your question, I think, right? And then, and I understand it is Onion Mountain was at least, what the exact question is in Onion Mountain was first. And then the decision is whether we have to say we can't do anything with Onion Mountain until we decide what we're going to do with all of the forests in Simsbury, which may be the answer. I'm just trying to understand what I'm being asked to answer.
We've had input from the public and saying that, we can't, it would be helpful not to look at these properties in isolation from what is going on in the forests around. We have, considerable state land that are being forested that do increase the diversity of the age stands in the town and create different habitats in town. But what about the properties that the town has? Is that what we want to do? Or what are we managing them for? Are we managing them for, it says in the deeds that we're managing for conservation and recreation.
So we
What
would
do
be
we
saying
mean by
back to the question we've been answered. I just
Yes.
want to,
Yeah,
again,
so
that we
that's-
are going
those
to
are
delay telling you what we can do, what you can do. You can't do anything with Onion Mountain until we determine this other broader question of what we
I
want to
think
do with all the town's forests.
Some of us would like to see that there is an overall plan for the forests.
Okay.
Rather than an isolated, it might come down to the same thing, but it's, from a policy point of view, it'd be better to put the policy out first and then get the strategy.
And that's fine. I'm just trying to see which is the cart and which is the horse,
Yeah.
really. at this
Policy-
point.
Just to correct one
Yeah.
element. The Conservation Commission is only an advisory body.
Yeah.
So we would not be in a position to say, you can't do Onion Mountain.
Okay.
We would either advise one way or the other, or not at all. But we do not regulate as a Conservation Commission.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then I was confused by what was coming from open
However-
space to us.
But we also, I know at the last meeting, we also suggested, we recognized in the Onion Mountain Plan that there might be things that we want addressed further in the plan before we went forward. I think that was a discussion at the last part meeting.
I can't tell you how much I've appreciated your indulgence for letting me speak up. Couple of things, but I'm trying not to oversimplify, but in my outline that I have referred to, I have taken all that you have been talking about into consideration, and it's been so helpful. All of your deliberations have been very helpful. Don't feel like you wasted time, because you have done something by way of fleshing thoughts out, and it has helped me put together sort of a picture. What I'd like to specifically comment, Don, you were absolutely right about those 8 goals that are in each one of those management plans. Those were goals established and created by the forester vis-a-vis the RFP. The town gives the forester the RFP, and he fashions his goals and his job according to that. Now, those goals are the goals for that specific management plan. The goals that I think you were trying to flesh out so beautifully was not the goals specifically to a management of a forest. It is the goals that we failed so long ago to establish about how we look at each and every one of our parcels individually and merit their value, and then look at that and say, this is what we're going to do with these forests. This is why we've got them. This is why the community has supported all of this, let's say, conservation, and we will look at that. Those are the goals that you've been working on so hard. It's very difficult for some of us, like, I'm going to take issue, Marjorie, with a term you use. What are we managing for?
Yes.
That is jargon,
Yes.
only familiar
Yeah.
to people who know enough about management plans to know what you're talking about. So this is what I would like to say, patience, my friends. It's going to come around to a point where we will finally understand that we are the caretakers. As a caretaker, each and every one of us has to understand an awful lot. It's a lot of homework, but we're the caretakers. Now, we're here, short piece of time. There were others before you, and there will be others after you, after us. I'm part of it. When you have that philosophy at the top, excuse my hands, when you have the philosophy at the top that represents what the community wants to do with its conserved lands, why it has it, understand them, know them well, then determine how we're going to be caretakers. That's what we need to do first. Then each caretaker that comes across in the next 10 years is going to be how many different ones. But if the caretakers understand the basic philosophy, and where that word comes in, and the basic tenets of what a good stewardship and stewarding means, then the caretakers can do their job. And that's what I'm thinking, that we got to go back to the basic that we missed 20 years ago. And I'm hoping that you will patiently wait. And I think there are two jobs here. I do have to comment one thing. You got sidetracked beautifully. And you got sidetracked because you as caretakers were not given the guidance of the philosophy and the goals at the top that were necessary. That's why you got sidetracked. Now you got the job, and you did a pretty good job of fleshing out some thoughts. And it's going to come out and be used. It's going to be worthwhile. That is one job. The job that you, as I understand, Don and I have a slight difference of opinion, that you were to respond to the Board of Selectmen, not to the Open Space Committee because it was taken away from us, about whether or not the Onion Mountain Plan, which had been singled out from the 4 that were done, it was the one singled out for implementation. It got sidetracked, like Don said, because the logger had a problem and the contractual thing went awry, and it didn't happen in 2014. A couple years later, it comes before us again, and we are considering it. Now, a couple years later, a lot of new information has come to our attention, and we are reassessing. But you have been asked the task, specifically, to respond to that question. Should we take the Onion Mountain Plan and implement it at this time? That's the way I see it. That's the question, and that is what I think was your charge. Thank you so much again for listening.
Thank you, Helen. All right, so I think tonight, let's go back, look at the letters, and eliminate my first paragraph of my letter. See what you like, see what you don't like. Come forward, as Charles says, with, you know, the points you like, the points you don't like. Hopefully by that time, Helen will have also sent her sort of, it's a review of sort of the history, you will have sent, hopefully we'll have the.
I hope it works out time-wise. It's just the timing is so lousy.
Yeah.
But let's see what we can do about it.
All right.
So the purpose of the letter and what we should be saying at the end is either we recommend this management plan with the following comments, or it should be that we can't recommend this management plan.
Right.
Is that right?
Or that we might
Those are
delay,
the two options, really, right?
delay our recommendation until we have a better idea of what the town's plan for these forests are. But we're not saying we're denying the management plan, we're saying we're delaying it. We could also say we could delay it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an either or. It's
Right.
just like, we're not ready to approve it yet. You know, it's well-written, it's, you know, it's best management, but we're not ready because we're not convinced we know exactly what the town's goals for these lands
Right.
are, other than conservation and recreation. That's another way of going about it. We will work harder.
But I would take a step back. One of the things we've heard a lot about is that the exact same goals that were put forward by the forester, there is evidence that you could achieve those same goals without having to do as much work with the forest. And that there was things in there that we haven't dealt with, like how we're gonna deal with invasives, et cetera, all of which make that plan, you know, I think questionable as to whether you would implement it as written. Even if all the goals are fine and all your things are, you know, you agree on. I'm not sure that we've heard enough from the public to say that they would want to do that.
And a lot of times we haven't looked at the specific plan itself because we've been looking, that, we've been saying that that's a strategy, that's a tactic. We wanted to go with the goals first, so,
Well, I mean, we've gone back and forth. I mean, if you go.
I know.
I mean, if you go, I mean, one of the reasons for the philosophy and the goals and everything is to know what part of your thing you're talking about. And one of our concerns has always been, that, and this goes back, half a year, that is the best way to achieve sort of the old growth forest characteristics, the multi, faceted forest, is it to take down the trees actively? Or is it to do something else? And we had a lot of discussion about that a while ago. So I think you could actually agree on the philosophy, you could agree on the main goals, and you can still have a debate about the
tactics, you still could.
And I don't think we have had we don't have a process in place to have an open discussion about the tactics. And therefore, if we were to go ahead and execute something, there'd probably, there's always gonna be people that aren't gonna be happy with what you do. But I think people will not have felt like they've had a voice in that. And it's nothing that says that current plan is bad, because we haven't done enough pieces for it. That's what I've been hearing through our discussions.
I think that's an accurate description.
I do think, I would make one very small point, which is that I think the plan does address invasive species. It says at various points that when we encounter them, we're going to deal with them.
Right, okay.
And that's where I brought up that I think it does a nice plan, it does a good job of addressing invasives, but we need to broaden it from a town's perspective to address the invasives in private areas. But let's move on for tonight. Let's look at those things and move on. For tonight, it's 9. Let's see, where is my, do we have anything else on the agenda?
We have, item 4 was the Woodland Street thing.
The what?
The logger couldn't make the meeting this evening,
Yeah.
so.
So that's been
That'll be on the
delayed.
agenda in 2 weeks.
All right, and then anything else? I've not buried it in my papers.
I think the last item was adjournment.
Adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you. And you a second?
Second.
All in favor? Excellent, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. If anyone's interested, I have invitations. The Canton Land Trust is having their annual dinner, and they are having a speaker on forest management is for the birds, is the title. It's all about managing the forest for bird life. I don't know.
So
I don't know.
where's, I'm sorry, where is this?
It's at the Canton Land Trust. It's going to be at La Trattoria on, I think, March 20th or something. These are invitations if you would like.
If it is of interest, I have an Audubon Forest Management for the Bird report,
Very good.
which you'll be interested to know was prepared by Audubon and by Eric Hansen
Good.
and the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station.
Excellent.
And it calls for thinning for regeneration to free crop trees
That's
and the
good, but
like.
before we do it, I think we should just think about what we're doing. All right. But thank you, that's a good report.